Happy holidays, summoners! If you may or may not have noticed, the game has been quickly approaching its 10-year anniversary now, and we're also playing it. God help us all. So, in order to honor this game's 10-year legacy, I decided that I'm going to start a massive 3-part series examining this game's history, and in today's video, we're going to be examining the stuff that didn't make it with us to the 10-year anniversary. That's right, today I'm defiling an old grave of mine, revisiting deleted content and Marvel Contest of Champions. Without further ado, let's just get straight into it. Welcome to the early days of MCOC. Looks pretty barren, right? There wasn't really much to do in this time. You could only really do story content in Arena. Wait, what is that? Quick Match was a pretty pointless feature. Instead of a 3v3, you would instead 1v1 your opponent for a since-defunct Versus Crystal. There was once a point where you could get 2-star Unified Crystals, but they were both pretty bad, so I understand why Kabam eventually took this out. On the topic of deleted content, we have deleted chapters within Acts 1 through 3. These were mainly removed in order to make the story content move a bit faster in the early game. Who needs story when you have players? Of course, when Alliances came out, there are a couple features that never got to see the light of day, including bases, which I think a lot of people know about, and it never got to see the light of day because Alliance War came out. You, of course, also have the Treasury, which actually did make it into the game for a very long time, where Alliance mates basically got to funnel in resources in order to, I think, play AQ? I don't really remember. Let's talk about a couple of other small things before we get into the juicy stuff with the champions. Back then, when you used to open a crystal, you could actually see the shards on the ground, as compared to today when that doesn't actually exist anymore. I think this was removed just for some performance issues, so I understand why they didn't decide to keep it. And of course, on the topic of crystals, you obviously have the collector monitor. When you got a 3 or 4-star champion, you got really upset. So this was actually changed quite a couple of times throughout its duration in the contest. Back in the early days when you pulled a champion, he had text explaining why he was upset. This was since removed, and when 5 stars came out, he upgraded his monitor setup. Let's talk about the music of the game. It's pretty cookie cutter, and it's been changed a couple times recently, but back in the early days, it had a completely different soundtrack, which is completely different than what we have now, which doesn't exist anymore. Take a listen. For reference, this is the current Victory soundtrack. If you ask me, the original soundtrack was way better, and I don't really know why they changed it, but let's continue on with the sound effects. A bit more of an obscure one, but when Red Hulk first came out, his second medium attack had this sound effect. This is what it sounds like now. Black Panther originally had completely different sound effects for all of his specials, but I'll just show you the special 3, what it used to sound like compared to what it sounds like now. And finally, when Drax and Ronan used to get hit, it sounded like this. Now, with all that out of the way, let's finally talk about the champions. And oh boy, there's a lot to talk about. Hey, editing ham here, you forgot to talk about when you used to finish Arena, you got this little crate here? Yeah. Okay, anyway, let's move on. First up, let's talk about character models. We have the very noticeable character icon changes such as Storm, Dormammu, Hulk, Rhino, and Electro, which got changed to this. You have 2 subtle ones in Thor, Jane Foster, and Captain America OG. By the way, it changed. Trust me, you can look at his eyes. Then, of course, you have the complete model changes. This was more prevalent this year, and the champions that were affected were OG Spider-Man, OG Black Panther, OG Iron Man, Redpool, She-Hulk, and Venom. That's not to say that this trend is entirely new, because once again, we have the 2 subtle OG Captain America and Thor Jane Foster changes. I'm telling you, it changed. The suit is slightly more blue in the old one. And then to top it all off, we have this very infamous gem of OG Captain Marvel without her mask on. It is very old and it is very weird. Alright, so now let's move on to animation, because this is where the bulk of this video is going to be. First, I'm going to talk about some quality of life animation updates for older champions, then I'm going to talk about the completely new animation changes, and then the very infamous Special 3 changes to both Miles Morales and Luke Cage. Starting off with a couple of visual things, back in the early days, for every champion in the game, they had this weird like yellow, I don't know, maybe green streak when they threw an attack. It looked weird, so it got removed. A couple more notable things is Drax used to not have knives, he would just punch for his basic animations, which is why in his current Special 3, when you hear this sound effect, it's because back then that's when he was putting his knives away. Then finally, back when Doctor Strange first released, he of course couldn't fly, which was quite funny. Okay, so for the subtle animation changes, I'm just gonna play them all in rapid fire, then any I think I have to explain afterwards, I'll do. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, and that's all the special attacks I could find. So I know a couple of you are wondering what even changed in a couple of these. Well, most of these were a bit too slow when they came out. It was very easy to punish, so they were just updated to be a little bit quicker. A couple of them are way more noticeable than others. So now let's move on to the changed basic attacks. There's not as many of the special attacks, but there's still a decent amount. First up, we have this overhead kick, which was a second medium for a lot of champions in the game. This was changed to a swooping kick, but actually it's not fully deleted because it still exists in the OG Daredevil's kit. I don't know why, but it's there. Then we have what I consider to be the most subtle change that I've ever covered so far. So you have this second medium kick that was prevalent in a lot of champions, and in newer releases, it ended up being slightly lower than before. Why? I don't know. But then this one is also still in the game because all the Visions still have it. Why? Speaking of Vision, did you know that his heavy attack used to look like this? Another champion who had this heavy attack was Kang, but both were eventually changed, where Vision got a cool 2-hit heavy attack, while Kang got the default extra large champion uppercut. Kinda boring because Kang's a villain of the contest, but whatever, let's talk about this knee attack. This was of course changed to this knee attack. This was actually changed pretty early in the game's lifespan, I believe 2015, as well as this second medium ground pound performed by Iron Man, which I also think was really cool. Rest in peace. Alright, don't worry, there's only two more things to talk about in this category. First off, you have this second medium attack by Black Panther. This was only shown in the trailer, I don't even think it made it into the final release of the game. And then finally, you have the default basic animations for every extra large champion in the game. So this was Rhino, Abomination, Hulk, Juggernaut, and Thanos. All of them were changed, and the only duplicate ones are Hulk and Thanos. Then of course you have the fully updated animations for a bunch of champions including Netflix Daredevil, OG Black Panther, OG Iron Man, Deadpool X-Force, OG Storm, and then Gamora. I don't necessarily consider their old animations to be deleted because a lot of the changed animations are present in older variations of the champion, except for Storm. RIP. Now let's talk about the most notable animation changes in the game's history. Now these animations may look a little bit similar to something else, but that's not what I'm here to talk about, so moving on. Finally, let's talk about the champions that never came to be, starting with the champion that I talk about so much, Iron Skull. This was going to be yet another Iron Man clone. He had the exact same animations, the exact same special attacks, but red, but his Special 3 was actually kind of interesting because it was Iron Patriot Special 3, but he did Hail Hydra at the end. So he became my favorite champion. Up next we have Doctor Strange Marvel now, who is the exact same as Doctor Strange but with a black suit. His animations were the exact same, but his abilities actually got leaked. he was going to be Doctor Strange, but with debuffs instead. Then, of course, we have a couple deleted boss characters that aren't in the game anymore. We have Infinity War Thanos, who had the Gauntlet, which I really miss. We had Dark Phoenix, who's basically Phoenix but red, so I don't really miss that. We had Old Man Torch, who is Human Torch, but with gray hair. And then, of course, we had Weapon X. Huh? Yes, I know he's in the game now and has been for a while, but when he first came out, he had a completely different set of abilities, so I consider him to be deleted, right? Similar to that, there's the Jessica Jones NPC, who is also a playable champion in the game, and then the Lockjaw NPC, who is obviously not a playable champion in the game for very obvious reasons. There was also Wolverine X-Force and Jean Grey, who, to my knowledge, only appeared in the 2017 X-Force event quest featuring Archangel, Iceman, and Psylocke. Oh yeah, there was also the Skrull, but whatever. Then of course you have the cannon fodder in the game, the Adaptoids, the Symbioids, the Deadpooloids, the Doom Henchmen, the Ultron Henchmen. There's just so many of these. And then to wrap this off, we have 4 more champions to talk about. This version of the Summon Symbiote that was a temporary feature compared to the permanent one that we have now. They look slightly different. We have another version of Netflix Daredevil who is a version without the suit. We have this version of Scarlet Witch who I'm happy didn't make it into the game because she looks kind of weird. And then finally, we have this classic version of Hulkbuster which looks amazing, and I'm really sad that we never got him. Now, before I finish the video, let's talk about some miscellaneous stuff that I wasn't able to put in any other section. White Magneto used to actually be sleeveless. I actually have a trading card that shows that. Iron Fist used to wear gloves, he doesn't anymore. Cyclops' Optic Blast got a visual makeover, and actually before they used to be one hit, which I didn't know before researching this. When Iron Man charged his heavy attack, it made this sound effect. Civil Warrior used to have reflective armor. Sorry, this is the only photo I can find of that. Magneto's medium attacks look different? Question mark? I should have put this in the animation section, but I kind of forgot. So Kang's Special 1 and Special 2 were changed from a blue laser to a green laser. And then, of course, you have Battlegrounds, which looks completely different compared to its original beta release. And that's it. I think that's the entire history of the deleted content in the game. If I missed anything, please let me know in the comments below, and get ready for part 2, which will cover the YouTubers in the game's history. Now get out of here, you're